Hello and welcome to this month's edition of My Cyber Why. This is the video cast where we speak to people from around the world about their work in cybersecurity and keeping our online world safe. Today's guest is Gene Spafford. He is involved in many things. He has been working in computing for over 40 years and in security for 35 of those. So he knows a lot about security and computing and has seen a lot. He is a professor at Purdue University and the executive director emeritus of Sirius at Purdue. Gene, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here.
So would you please tell the My Cyber Why listeners a little bit about who Spaf is?
Sure. The full story would take quite a bit of time, I suppose, and I might embellish it with a few things along the way. But in brief, I'm a professor at Purdue University. I've been here at the university now for something like 34, 35 years, and still enjoying that as a career. I very much enjoy working in that kind of environment. But my world is bigger than that. I do more than that. So outside of that, I'm very active in some activities with ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery. And this is the largest and oldest professional organization for people who work in computing. Many people know about the conferences or the communications of the ACM or other journals that are published through ACM. They're also the organization that gives out the Turing Awards, and they do lots of other things. And I'm a life member of the organization. I've served on their council. I'm still involved working there with the organization. So that's something that I like to do, is to give back to the community. And also locally, I am the chairman of the board of an organization that provides therapeutic writing to individuals with various kinds of disabilities. And therapeutic writing is with horses, ponies, donkeys, and basically the individuals mostly are children, some young adults, but they have everything ranging from physical disabilities like, say, multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy to individuals who have cognitive limitations, and some who've gone through emotional trauma. And the organization serves a 7-county area around where I live. So those all together do a lot to occupy my time, and whatever's left over, I like to read a little science fiction and watch bad movies on TV. So there really isn't a lot of what I would consider to be downtime that isn't somehow programmed. Oh, and I shouldn't forget, I'm also on the board of a wonderful organization that you are also associated with, Sightline, that is a nonprofit devoted to helping other nonprofits improve their cybersecurity. Very often, nonprofit organizations are struggling to keep the doors open and fulfill their mission, and they don't have the resources or the knowledge on how to secure their systems. And this organization is devoted to that, and it was started by one of my former PhD students. And so I guess I have. Well, I'm not going to stop because I'll probably think of other things that I do as well. But those all keep me pretty busy.
Well, that's your official title on LinkedIn, right? Involved in many things. So
Yes.
You are, in fact, involved in many things. I'm curious how you find bad movies. Do you look at like the tomatometer? My spouse calls it the tomatometer, the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter. Like, how do you find the bad ones?
I have a list of bad movies that I've watched over the years that I kind of like. And I have friends who also sort of collect their lists, and we exchange these. And sometimes when I have hit the end of what's on my to watch list, I do a web search and put in the name of 3 movies chosen at random from my list. and I come up with other people's lists. So I think the internet has really helped fuel this hobby of mine.
Nice. It's like your own personal Mystery Science Theater 3000 kind of.
Oh yes, I do make a lot of snide comments when they're playing.
I can imagine. All right, so a lot of people are probably going to wonder, you've been at Purdue and you've been a professor for a very long time. What is it like to be, what is your day-to-day job? What do you do day to day, and what's it like to be a professor in cyber?
Well, as of right now, it's a little different because of the pandemic. I'm doing most of my work remotely from home. So let me describe what it's usually been like rather than how it's constrained right now. So during what used to be normal times, I would get up in the morning and I have various mailing lists, and I check my email. I check the mailing list for any kind of uh, interesting breaking stories that I need to follow up on, because it's helpful for teaching and working with students to know if there's some new thing that's going on. And then once that's done, um, I I would normally actually go and spend a little time at the gym and then head into my office. And once at my office, depending on the day of the week, I might be preparing for a class that I would be teaching. And through my career, I've taught both undergraduate and graduate classes, usually in computer science, but I also have courtesy appointments in several other departments. And so sometimes they've been joint seminars. Along with the teaching, I would have perhaps some open office hours for students to come in and talk to me. I would have some appointments with my graduate students that I was advising. And in the department, sometimes there are committee meetings, there are tasks as faculty. So for instance, we evaluate new courses, we look through applications for students coming in to decide who to make offers to, some things like that. And depending on time available and deadlines and the like, I would also spend time working with students or colleagues, or perhaps by myself, on preparing some papers for publication or seeking grants that would support more grad students and more work going forward. Most people who aren't in academia or don't spend time there sort of see professors and they see us teaching only a few classes a week and think, well, gosh, that's easy. No, most days are actually 10-day work days, and on the weekend we also put in hours because we have to keep current with the material for the classes. We have all these committee assignments. We have all the advising that we one-on-one takes time, and then the expectation to prepare papers and grant proposals all occupy a fair amount of time, even for someone um, more senior, such as myself. I can give some things to my students or to junior faculty to address, but then I have to spend time supervising and advising. So it's a very full day.
Yeah, it sounds like. Okay, so with that, knowing that you've done this for a long time and there are a lot of pressures, there's pretty full days, what inspires you? What's your cyber why? Why do you get excited every day to get up and do, or most days to get up and do what you do?
Well, I'd say that there are sort of two passions around what caused me to do that. And the first one that continues to motivate me is I love working with students. I love the feeling when I see someone sort of, oh, I get it, when I'm describing something to them, either in a classroom or one-on-one with my graduate students. So that continues to bring me a level of inspiration and joy in what I do, and it's why I'm stayed at a university rather than going off to do a startup or working in industry. because I wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. The second thing is more generally in the field to do the research to make a difference is exactly that, is to make a difference. I've always felt a desire to try to make sure that things are a little bit better after I'm done with them than when I got to them. And in cyber, there are so many challenges that we need to face. So when I've had some good ideas, and several of them have turned into companies, they've turned into products that people use, there's a sense I have that I do have something to contribute, and that also keeps me going because there's always more to do.
Yeah. Can you talk a little about some of those ideas that then became something that was a company or something that we may use every day, a technology?
Well, I can give one that is older as an example. So when early on when I started in my career, I came up with the realization that too many security efforts were focused more on the confidentiality aspect of security, and safety engineering was working on availability, but there wasn't anything really for integrity. So I did some work there, and that turned into a tool that we released public domain that then evolved into a company, and that company is Tripwire. So I came up with a design for that, and Gene Kim was my student at the time, built the prototypes, and the two of us then developed it out into something that we shared with the community. So that continues to be something I can see and I'm very happy about. The other example, there are many in between that I could give examples of. But another area that I've done some work in is in deception. I was one of the first people to work in using deception as a technique in security. And the ideas that I had for deception technology have turned into a major research thrust in several government agencies. And there are about a half dozen companies right now that are out on the marketplace that are marketing various deception-related products. So I feel good that I was there. And there's some other things in firewalls and scanners, honeypots. I've worked in all of these things. I generally, most people sort of see me as doing the first work in digital forensics, which is, of course, turned out into be a big area. And so I've been lucky with the topics I picked, but I continue to see where they make a difference, and I want to continue trying to do that.
Yep. And thank you for doing it, because you really have changed the landscape for the better. So when you look around and you think about what you would like people to know about cyber, if you could just talk to everybody in the audience, you could say, this is the one thing I'd like everybody listening to do after they listen to this, after they've watched your interview, what would that be?
Well, I guess if it was for everybody, the thing to understand is that cybersecurity, good security, isn't a goal, it's a process. Because the threats change, the assumptions that we're building on change, the technology changes, the world changes. If we were to be having this discussion a year ago, and we were talking about security, all of the things that have happened with the pandemic, that the SolarWinds supply chain attack, those two things wouldn't have happened, and so anybody who felt very comfortable with their security posture at that time didn't see these things barreling towards them. So I think everybody needs to understand that this is an ongoing process, and we have to continue to put resources and vigilance into it. For people who aren't deeply into the field, there are some simple things that they can do. They need to improve how they access systems. So in that regard, learn about two-factor authentication, get a password manager that you can use strong passwords rather than reusing passwords. Educate yourself about how to avoid phishing kinds of attacks in your email. Basically, don't click on links in your email unless you're absolutely 100% certain what it is. For most organizations as well, small organizations, keep good backups. Know that you can restore your system if a catastrophe occurs. And that catastrophe could be anything from a fire to ransomware that encrypts everything on your disk. If you have good backups, a good recovery plan, you're covered there. And then for people who are further up the management chain, something I've been talking about for the last couple of years, and longer really, is understand that the cheapest approach is not necessarily the best. And so something that has been talked about quite a bit in the industry recently, the idea of zero trust. Well, that's not a new concept. That's 20 years ago, I was teaching that concept. The idea is separation of systems, reducing the number of trusted pathways between systems, using internal controls as well as external controls, because you don't want a computing environment where a mistake or a penetration of one system gives somebody access to everything else in the enterprise. And unfortunately, we have many people in a decision-making capacity in government as well as companies who are interested in driving the costs down of their security enterprise. And if they've got someone competent in charge who's done a reasonably good job, then nothing has happened. And as a result, they say, oh, good, we don't need to spend as much because nothing has happened. And as a result, eventually things happen. Instead, if you've got someone who knows what they're doing, listen to them and think carefully about capitalizing and re-architecting to better defend your resources, because the threats are only going to get larger and more sophisticated as more nation states get involved and more criminal gangs are able to build up their resources to build attack weapons. So that runs the gamut, I think, between sort of the novice and the more experienced decision makers, and in between, it's a matter of keep learning. The people in the middle, very popular right now is the idea of pen testing, red teaming as a way to get security. And that's really not correct. We shouldn't be able to penetrate systems and then figure out how to patch afterwards. We should be building our systems so they can't be penetrated. And we confirm that with an occasional test. But we're seeing many in the industry move to the idea that good security is having an in-house red team that's always attacking your system. And that's really not the best place to use funds or energy. But unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the industry who haven't learned how to defend systems. They haven't learned the basics of security and software engineering. And so, but breaking into systems is easy because so many of them are poorly defended. And so that's where people get their starts, and that's where people continue to work. So, I mean, that's a broad range. You asked me, but there are people all over the map in experience and jobs, and I have a sort of a different message for each group.
That was like a master class. Thank you for all the messages. And yeah, I agree with you so much on the penetration testing. I stopped doing that decades ago because I got it got almost frustrating how easy it was to get into the system. So yeah, I agree. Like, let's try and build resilient systems so our red teams get really frustrated instead of just saying, yeah, well, the red team will find it and then we'll fix it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we have undercapitalized. We've undercapitalized the engineering and research, and so for a very quick example is in a larger enterprise. if they spent the money to break up the internal network with internal firewalls so that they had maybe 5 internal networks for different purposes and only granted accounts in the segment where people needed to do their job, they would be far better off than having one large corporate network with a single firewall facing outside and a red team constantly poking at the system. But it isn't seen that way. The people don't structure their thinking that way. And as a result, we shouldn't be surprised we continue to have problems.
Yeah, it's true. And segmentation continues to be, it was hard back in the day when I was managing networks, and unfortunately it continues to be not as easy as the flat network. So unfortunately that is very often the default. Well, thank you so much. This has been really inspiring, and thank you for sharing what you do and what inspires you, and thank you for everything you've done, honestly, for our industry. We all owe you a debt of thanks and gratitude. So thank you very much for sharing your cyber why with our audience, and thanks everybody for listening. This has been my cyber why. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye.